I was pushed into a car by 5 strangers on New Year's Eve. I thought they were giving me a ride back, but they drove right past my place and took me to a remote farmhouse. Hi everyone, welcome to the pilot episode. All the videos on this channel are real stories from Reddit users. Today's subreddit, Let's Not Meet, enjoy watching. Was I too friendly with this guy? I've been reading a lot of stories on this subreddit and found that there were a lot of stories similar to mine. I thought this would be the space to tell this story. It's a bit long, so I apologize in advance. I was 17 years old at the time this happened. I went to this youth church event, and it was supposed to be like prom since the country I live in don't have events like that. Some people showed up with dates, but my girls and I decided to show up together. There were a lot of people in the event, some I didn't even recognize. Later into the night, a man asked me to slow dance. I didn't know him, but I knew he was new at our church, so as to be polite, I said yes. As he ushered me into the dance floor, he introduced himself. Let's call him Caleb for this story. I noticed he had an accent and I brought it up in conversation, and he said that he grew up in the UK. Throughout the dance we talked and got to know each other a bit. I remember thinking that he was a pretty sweet guy. He told me that he was invited to the event, and didn't really know anyone, and that he just moved for work, and was in his 20s. I forgot his actual age. Immediately, I was kind of weirded out by the age gap, but decided not to think too much about it. This was all just a friendly interaction. After the song finished, he asked if we could dance again. I made an excuse that I needed to grab a drink and freshen up. He said that he was willing to grab me a drink while I went to the washroom. I hesitantly agreed and made my way to the washroom. I stayed in the washroom for one song, hoping that he would get tired of waiting for me. But when I got back to the event, he was sitting at my table. I could tell he was looking for me in the crowd, and when his eyes landed on me, he smiled and beckoned me over. In that moment, I remember thinking to myself that maybe he needed company since he didn't know anyone at the event. I sat beside him, and he gave me the drink he got for me. I did not drink it. He asked again if I wanted to dance, but this time I said no and said that I was tired. He didn't leave the table though, but stayed to talk with me. At this point, I just wanted to get out of the conversation, be away from him. I told him that I was going to go talk to my friend in the other table. I told my friend what was going on, and I stayed at her table until the guy left. For the rest of the night, I didn't see him and thought that was the end of that. I worked at a women's clothing store in a mall. After school, I usually would have a closing shift, 3 shifts a week. I went to clock in, and a coworker of mine told me that a man was looking for me and that I just missed him. I thought nothing of it, and thought maybe it was just a friend of mine, or a family member. Next shift it happened again, and I asked my coworker what he looked like, and they described Caleb to me. How did he know I worked there? I was shocked, and it became even creepier when it happened again on my next shift. It had been almost a week, and I was just glad we kept missing each other. But I figured my luck ran out when I saw him waiting by the door to the store as I was coming in for my shift. He greeted me and told me that he had been wanting to talk to me. I asked him why, and he said he wanted to take me out on a date. I have never been on a date before, and I honestly didn't want my first one to be with him, so I said no. He then asked if he could just buy me food at the food court for my break. At this point, I was getting the feeling that he didn't want to take no for an answer. I figured that it was a public place and that he wouldn't try anything. So I, foolishly, agreed. He went in the store with me and walked me to the back room as he talked about how he was glad to see me and that there was more he wanted to know about me. As my shift started, I noticed he was still in the store, looking around. He stayed for about an hour, and often I would catch him looking at me. Where I was, he was also nearby. This went on for about an hour, and I was very creeped out. I let one of my coworkers know what was going on, and told her that if I wasn't back after my break, that she should let the security or someone know. I only had 30 minutes for my break, so I was hoping for the time to go fast. I made my way out of the back room, and as I pushed open the door, he was already there waiting for me. We walked to the food court, and on the way there we had some small talk. But what creeped me out is when he asked if he could have my number. I lied and told him I didn't have a phone yet. He bought me food, but he didn't buy anything for himself. So there we were, sat at one of the tables as he watched me eat. The conversation was dry, and I was quick and short in my responses. I just wanted it to end already. He kept asking about my life, what I like to do for fun, and so on. He then asked if I have a boyfriend. I said no, and that I didn't want to be in a relationship. I quickly finished my food and told him that we should head back. He insisted on staying as there was 10 minutes left of my break. I lied and said I needed that extra time to finish one of my tasks. The walk back to the store was quiet. I found it weird because he was so talkative before, and now he was just dead silent. Once we were at the front of the store, I said my goodbye and turned to leave, but he caught my arm and pulled me close to him. He said that he liked me ever since he saw me at the event, and that he wanted to get to know me more, and was interested in me. Mind you, I'm 17, and this guy is in his 20s. It all felt wrong, and I backed away from him. I was as frank as I could be, and told him that I'm not interested in him, or being in a relationship. He asked if we could at least keep in touch through my socials, and I told him I wasn't comfortable giving him that information. He then had the audacity to ask if he could just hug me, and I wasn't sure what to say, and before I could say anything, he pulled me in for a hug. It was a tight hug, and I pulled away quickly. He said he was sorry for surprising, said goodbye, and walked off. After that incident, I didn't see him at the store. I did see him a couple of times at church, and he would smile at me and try to talk to me, but I would always try to avoid him. He then stopped coming to church, and I never saw him again. So to the creepy guy who liked me, let's not meet ever again. At the time, my family and I lived in Liverpool in the northwest of England in the early 2000s. Where we're from has always been notorious for its substance problem, and being one of the more deprived areas in the country. I'm the youngest of 4, who are all a few years older than me, and by the time I was in high school were already starting their own families. It was just me and my mum at home. She worked as a nurse, and was sometimes assigned night shifts, so I was often left alone apart from the neighbors checking in every once in a while, which I didn't mind. While my mum worked, I'd complete simple household tasks like cleaning and putting the washing on the line outside. We didn't have a back garden, we had a garden on the front of the house. In the summer, I'd leave the front door open so I could go in and out easier, and to let some fresh air into the house, which wasn't uncommon on the estate, as most had kids which would be running in and out of each other's houses all day. I started noticing that some of my clothes would go missing off the line, particularly underwear. But I just shrugged it off as wind blowing it off or some kid's idea of a joke. But it started happening every time there was washing out, even when no kids were outside playing. We didn't own a dryer, so there was no other option but to put the clothes outside to dry. So more and more items kept going missing. Then more disturbing things started happening, such as me going upstairs and returning to the front door being wide open when I'd left it closed, or the entire washing line being pulled down, with only certain items being taken from the pile. I'd also often find hand smudges on the windows that I convinced myself were from me opening and closing them. I thought I was just being paranoid, but was still scared and didn't want to be alone, especially of a night as my imagination got the better of me. So I explained to my brother about strange things I'd noticed, and if he could pick me up and take me to his house for the night. The next morning, my brother got a call from my mum asking if I was with him, and to return home to clean up the mess I'd left. My brother came with me so he could explain to my mum that I was extremely paranoid and anxious, as he knew she was stressed from her long shift and would not be lenient on me for leaving a mess. Once we got home, I noticed there were dirty footprints throughout the house, which were definitely too big to be mine or my mum's that were not there when I'd left. My mum was pacing around the living room in a huff, pointing and shouting about pillows being thrown around and glasses, plates being left lying around unwashed. I had my brother's word to back me up that it had definitely not been left this way when he had picked me up. She was confused as who else would have made the mess since I was last person to be home. She asked me to clean up as she was going to bed and to make sure everything was tidy for when she woke up. When she reached the top of the stairs, she started calling my brother's name. Every door upstairs was open and every room had been rifled through. Both mine and my mum's underwear drawers had been flung open, with clothes covering the floor. Both beds had been untidy, as if someone had slept in them, with cigarette butts flicked onto the floor. It was obvious that someone else had been in the house, and it seemed they'd made themselves feel at home. My brother sent me and Mum downstairs to phone the police as he checked the rest of the house. He noticed the bathroom light on, and noticed that whoever had been here had ran themselves a bath, which they had forgot to drain, and had left a ring around the tub, ostavив grazny sled of vanya, and made a cup of tea. Resting on the toilet were multiple pairs of me and my mum's underwear, which had been ispachkane imi, which at that point my brother had to leave the bathroom and wait for the police. When the police finally came, they told us it was most likely a homeless person, or someone on drugs, who just wanted a bed to sleep in for the night, since nothing was actually taken, including a ring on my mum's dresser, which was clearly in sight, and there was nothing much they could do other than suggest we make sure all windows and doors are locked. After that, I wasn't allowed to stay home alone of a night anymore, just in case something similar were to happen again, but nothing ever did, apart from underwear occasionally going missing off the line. I'm still not sure if this was a stalker situation, or the police were right. It was just a coincidence, but it still freaks me out, L. For New Year's, my boyfriend at the time, one of our friends and myself drove up to the entrance, seaside town in Australia just south of Newcastle. My boyfriend and his friend decided to have an early night. I wasn't ready to go to sleep yet, and we were right on the main road just up from the bars and clubs, so I headed down there, hoping to catch up with some friends I knew from the area. Obviously, I'd had a few drinks at this point, given it was New Year's Eve. I wasn't able to find my friends, and the venues were starting to close, so I turned around to come back. As I walked up the street, I was approached by a group of 5 men, 4 young, probably in their 20s, and an old man, 40 plus. There wasn't many people still on the streets by that time. They struck up a conversation with me and offered to give me a ride. I already felt uneasy, so said no thanks and tried to walk off. But as we approached a parked sedan, they pushed me into the back, still keeping up the false pretense they were going to give me a lift back to my accommodation. As we approached where I was staying, they deliberately spoke loudly over the top of me, and we drove right past. They headed off the main road and proceeded along a country road to a farmhouse, asking me all kinds of personal questions on the way. Who was I there with? Where was I from? How old was I? At this point I was thinking, I'm not going to get out of this, and was having flashes of what I'd seen over the years on TV about the Anita Cobby murder. I kept my cool and answered them in a way to let them know that I had someone expecting me who would notice my absence soon. I also told them I was 15 years old. I was 18, and that seemed to cause some debate among them, if not for the age, then for the possibility that somebody might already be out looking for me. The farmhouse was bare, and didn't really look like anyone was living there. They sat me in a chair in the middle of the living room while they all went into the attached kitchen. I could see them debating nervously amongst themselves, looking over at me through the countertop opening in the wall, like they couldn't agree on anything. One of them kept asking me if I'd like something to eat or drink, which I refused. While they were talking, the old man broke away from the group, came out and asked me if I wanted to go up the back with him to see the horses, in a creepy tone like he was talking to a child. I made up a reason to refuse, like I didn't like horses. I think it was at that point I figured out this was his idea, and the young guys were having some serious regrets. It's likely they were trying to figure out how they were going to get out of this now. What would a man that age be doing, hanging around a bunch of young guys? Everything about him gave off unhinged vibes. I'd played it pretty cool throughout not wanting to do something that could set them off. I saw the opportunity to get out of there by keeping up the pretense of believing the excuses they'd been giving me. We got back in the car and headed back to the entrance where they'd abducted me. I was relieved I got out of there, but what surprised me even more was the driver didn't just put me out by the side of the road or drop me off directly. First, he dropped every other person in the car off, except the old guy, who stayed back at the farm, to their homes. I couldn't believe it in light of what had just happened. I'd seen his car, I'd seen their faces, and I saw where they all lived. It didn't at all seem consistent with people worried about getting caught. Initially, I thought they were going to kill me when they got done doing whatever they had planned, but this made it look like it had been done on a whim, and they hadn't thought it through. I would say at the suggestion of the old guy, who thought he was going to orchestrate this whole thing. By the time he finally dropped me off at my accommodation, he was apologizing profusely. I immediately told my boyfriend and his friend what happened, and they both accused me of lying. I think that was probably the most upsetting part. I arrived back just on dawn, so I would have been gone for about 4 hours, and nobody had even been worried, let alone gone out to try to find me. When I got back home to Sydney, I told my parents what happened, and they didn't believe me either. I strongly thought the police should have known about it in case that was a practice run for them, and they went on to do something nasty to somebody else. I'm certain the old guy would, if he hadn't already. The young guys, I think, were just kids who he had managed to talk into that harebrained idea, who bailed out halfway through when they realized what they were getting into. I'm not sure what made me think of it now all these years later, but I did wonder if anything had happened to anyone before that event, or since. I've told a few people over the years, but they've generally not known how to react, or just brushed it off as it happened a long time ago. I haven't heard anything about any similar cold cases, or anything else come up that I could call and offer potentially useful information on. So, I'm hoping that nothing else did happen to anyone. Honestly, I can be a paranoid person, but I knew this was a little too far. I had this friend. Being an awkward teenager in a small town, it was hard to make friends, at least any with the same interest as me. We had a new student, and most people wanted to be his friend. Decently attractive guy, artsy, and pretty introverted. Most girls were trying to hit on him, but I just wanted to be his friend. He never really talked to anyone, but I never thought of that was weird. I mean, most teenagers are like that. We ended up being friends. This led me to do some semi-risky things for about 2 years, from going to places we shouldn't be going, shoplifting, substances, and other stupid stuff. He was into all this spooky-like stuff, from animations, music, etc. I thought it was kinda cool, all dark and mysterious, meant to be all ominous. He kept journals on journals of random things, nothing I was allowed to see. He had a few drawings of random cult-like figures, saying he wanted to create his own fake cult. After a while, I figured out he was not in the right headspace. From being in and out of mental health specialist to distant parents. I was also a teen who struggled, but something definitely changed. Begging me to go 5 hours out of town at 3 a.m., trying to get me to sneak out with him even after I said no. How we would be back by morning. Just getting more and more reckless. Also, one time we went to a abandoned shed. Well, it definitely was not abandoned. We found pictures of dead animals and other hunting gear. He seemed a little too fascinated, and I just wanted to get the hell out of there. That was probably a point when things got weird. He would start to ask me to come collect dead animals off the street with him. I was not down with that, though I tried to keep an open mind. Maybe it was taxidermy. After a while I had a feeling it was not, and if it was a little excessive. One day I found multiple bleach buckets of dead animals that have been in there for weeks on end. It smelt, it was gross, and frankly terrifying. I did not speak to him after that. Later he ended up asking to be friends again. I said no. After that, I have only heard of him going to a mental hospital. So, to the teenage best friend, I hope you got better, but let's not meet again.
This happened about 2 years ago. Me and my girlfriend used to live in an apartment complex, and we had this neighbor that was extremely nice. Like uncomfortably nice. We were always nice back. Me and my girlfriend are in our 20s, and this was a man probably in his 50s. So sometimes we wouldn't really understand the jokes he was making, but everything was chill. Well, one night around maybe 10 p.m., me and my girlfriend were leaving the apartment complex to go to Walmart, and we walked by his door talking at a normal volume. By the time we got to our car, he busted out of his door and started yelling. I couldn't understand what he was saying, so Elle assumed he was either on the phone or yelling at someone he lives with. Well, the next day after I get off work and come home, he is standing outside in the parking lot and he is staring at me and talking, but I can't hear him because the window is up. So I'll stay in the car until he leaves. Yes, I know Lumawus. I go up to my apartment and everything is okay. Well, me and my girlfriend walk out the apartment to do our laundry like 15 minutes later, and he's sitting in his car waiting for us, and he says, "Don't ever try to yell at me through my door again. If you want to have a conversation, you can knock." We tell him we weren't talking to him. We were talking to each other and walking by his door, and he doesn't believe us. Still says we were trying to talk to him through the door. He lived in the complex for another year, and every time we walked past him, he would either glare, mumble under his breath, and sometimes laugh at us. And this may just be paranoia, but one day we went to 3 different thrift stores in town, and every time we walked out to go to our car, he was in the parking lot sitting in his car on the phone. So I don't know if he was following us. I'm getting the vibe that he may have some sort of mental disorder, maybe drugs. I think about this guy a lot, and it always bewilders me.
I, female, was 22 years old when this happened. I worked in a grocery store which had been featured in the news. You could see me in the clip and it was clear where I worked. I just came back from vacation, and a coworker told me that some guy had been coming around every day for a week asking for me. When I asked who or why, they told me they had no idea, but he was around my age and seemed a little off. A few hours passed by and my coworker came and told me that the guy was back and again asking for me. Let's call him James. I can't remember his name anyways. In the back room we had a computer and you could see all the camera footage from all over the store. I looked and didn't recognize who James was, but decided to go ask what he wanted. He was clearly drunk and said that he had seen me on TV and wanted to ask me out. I replied with, "I'm sorry, but I'm in a relationship, even though I was single." I said I needed to get back to work, and he asked me if he should come with me. I was confused and said that I am working. He then left, but I could see him through the cameras outside the store drinking. A few hours passed by, and he was still waiting for me outside, so I had to use another exit when I left. The next day, I came to work and saw him waiting for me outside the store. He had a huge smile on his face and walked up to me. He was really shy and didn't say a word until I said "hey" while passing by to get into the store. He followed me inside and said he needed to talk. I asked him what's up, and he said, "How about we go to the movies?" He was really creepy, and I replied, "I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend. Remember?" As I was walking away, he started following me and asked if he should come help me with my work. "No thanks," I replied. Once again, I looked at the camera footage, and yet again he was waiting for me outside. At this point, I started asking a male coworker to escort me safely to the tram every night when my shift ended. I started getting really scared once this had been going on for a while, and he clearly wouldn't leave me alone. I asked my brother if he could drive me to work on his motorcycle and hug me outside my workplace, so it looked like he was my boyfriend and James would maybe leave me alone, since I knew he was somewhere watching and waiting for me to get to work. It didn't help. I started getting messages like, "Is that your boyfriend?" and "He doesn't need to know if we go out." I was confused of how he had gotten my number. I asked all of my coworkers, and a new one said she'd given my number because he had said he's a friend of mine. I was pissed. At this point, I asked my male coworkers to throw him out if he ever came back, which was a lot. A couple of weeks went by without any harassment, and I finally thought he had left me alone. Boy, was I wrong. I came to work one day and was in the changing room and heard that we have a new coworker and it's his first day. I didn't think anything of it and proceeded to change my clothes. Once I got out of the changing room, my jaw dropped. Another coworker said, "Hey, this is James." I looked in horror as she asked me what's wrong. I said, "I know, this is the creep that has been stalking me for weeks," as James smiled. I went and searched for my boss to ask him what the heck. My boss said he had no idea that this was my stalker and kind of laughed it off as no big deal. I told him either he leaves or I will. He said that I wouldn't have to work the same shift as James and he couldn't fire him. He lied. I had a lot of shifts with him, and wherever I went he followed without saying a word. He just kept following me. I would often have my lunch break by the computer so I could see where he was, and every day I could see him just staring at me behind me as I ate. We had cameras there also. This went on for a while. He would text me every day, but at work he didn't say a thing, just stare. My boss finally understood what a freak James was, and that he didn't do any work, just stalking, and started to think of ideas how to fire him. One time, I noticed James was clearly drunk at work and told my boss. He got fired, and this is when the stalking finally stopped. This story occurred in 2011, when I, F, was 12 years old. For context, 2 years before this, my family and I moved to Canada. I'm French-Dutch German, and before the move, we lived in France. Over Christmas break, we went back home to visit family. We spent a week in France with my mom's side of the family, before heading to Germany to see my dad's side. My mom had to fly back to Canada early for work, so I stayed in Germany with my dad and my brother for a few more days. On the day of our flight, we checked in our bags, and the airline worker told us that they could bump us up to business class. My mom traveled a lot for work and had accumulated a lot of miles. This is the only time that this has ever happened to me, and unfortunately, my one-time business class experience was ruined by a creep. We got on the plane, and since we got upgraded at the last minute, we were not seated together. The seats are all much more separated than in economy, but this is just to say that we were somewhat further apart from each other on the plane. I was sitting further back from my dad and brother, closer to the economy section. About an hour into the flight, the pilot announced over the intercom that several bathrooms on the plane were out of order. In a classic case of bathroom anxiety, I got up to use the toilet just in case. I went to the nearest working toilet, which was shared with economy. 2 people were ahead of me in line, so I stood near the wall on the economy side of the hallway. That's when I noticed a man staring at me from a few rows down. The most striking details I remember about him were his thick black glasses and long, droopy facial features. He reminded me of a younger Woody Allen. I was a shy kid, and I was always particularly scared of adult men. I wonder why, so I quickly looked away. A moment later, he got up and walked over. He asked if I was also waiting in line for the bathroom, and I nodded. Then, he asked if I was sitting in economy. Being a naive 12-year-old, and a bit of a dumbass, I pointed toward my seat in business class. By this point, the people ahead of me had already gone in, and I was next in line. That's when he leaned closer and told me that he had a trick for spying on people in airplane bathrooms. I didn't know how to react, so I gave an awkward laugh and stayed quiet. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was fiddling with the occupied sign and told me he knew how to lift it to look inside. While he was talking, he had this crooked smile on the edge of his lips, which widened when he told me that once it was my turn, he would be able to see what I was doing. Before I could process what he had said, I heard the toilet flush. The person inside left, and the strange man made a go-on-in gesture with his arms. I locked the door and just stood there, wondering if he was actually able to see me. My bathroom anxiety took over, and I went to use the toilet anyway, all the while staring at the lock to see if it moved. Thankfully, nothing happened. When I stepped out, he was standing there, way too close to the door, and winked at me. I rushed back to my seat, put on my headphones, and continued watching my movie, trying to shake off this strange encounter. I felt something was wrong in my gut, but I wasn't able to articulate it, let alone recognize it, as feeling scared and violated, even though I'm pretty sure he had no actual way of peeping on me. After some time, I started to feel better. I was excited when dinner was served. I expected business class meals to be 4-star gourmet cuisine. I was wrong. After dinner, the cabin went into sleep mode, meaning that the lights were dimmed and most passengers either watched movies or slept. I was beginning to doze off when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I looked up to find the toilet creep smiling at me. He told me that he was a photographer and that he thought that I had a beautiful frame. He said he'd love to take some pictures of me. I just sat there, frozen in fear and confusion. Thankfully, at that moment, my dad decided to go check on me, and he found a stranger talking to his 12-year-old daughter. The guy saw me look to my dad, and before my dad could say anything, started trying to bullshit him. He told my dad he was a talent scout from a modeling agency, and pulled out a business card to prove he was legit. My dad didn't buy any of it, and told Toilet Creep to leave me alone or he'd call a flight attendant. After the guy left, I told my dad what happened. We switched seats in case the man decided to come back, but even after switching, I was still on edge. For the next hour, I just sat there. No music, no movie, no games. I just stared ahead and, every once in a while, I turned back to where my dad was sitting to make sure the man hadn't tried to come back. As I was drowning in anxiety, we got another message from the pilot. Apparently, there were more plane malfunctions and, among other things, there was only one working toilet left. Even though we were already nearly halfway to Toronto, the plane ended up turning around back to Munich. Now I know that this was my terrified 12-year-old mind at work, but I started spiraling. Was he somehow at fault for the toilet malfunctions? Could he try to sabotage the plane by messing with the toilets? What if he tried to kidnap me after we landed? Thankfully, none of that happened, and on our way back to Munich, my dad checked on me frequently, which helped me feel safer. Once we landed, we were all ushered towards the nearest exits, and that's the last time I saw him, standing in line, staring at me. I was next to my dad, at my original seat, and my brother had come to our aisle, completely unaware of what had happened. When my dad saw the man, he told my brother and I to sit back down, and we waited until we were among the last people to exit the plane. As we left the airport, my dad made sure we took our time to avoid accidentally bumping into him. We were rebooked on a flight for the next day. No business class this time, we asked, but we failed, and spent the night at an airport hotel. After we got everything sorted, my dad called my mom, and they both tried to talk to me about what had happened, but I had nothing to say. I was confused, and I didn't know how to feel. I now know that this situation was threatening, and that my gut feeling was correct. But at the time, and for years afterwards, I wondered if I had misunderstood the situation, and I was just dealing with a harmless idiot. I still wonder if this guy's toilet spying trick was real, or if he was just messing with a 12-year-old who didn't know better. And I don't want to imagine what could have happened if my dad hadn't been there. Toilet creep, let's never meet again. A creepy man on an airplane told me he had a trick for spying on people on the toilet right before I went to use it. He later went to find me at my seat to ask if he could take pictures of me. Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Good night.